Chapter 7, Global Shadows, Wars Reach Beyond Europe's Trenches. While the Western Front became synonymous with the Great War's grinding stalemate and the Eastern Front consumed empires in vast, fluid movements, the conflict was never confined to Europe's heartland. Across the world, from the burning deserts of the Middle East to the dense jungles of Africa, and from the vast expanses of the Pacific to the depths of the Atlantic, the war cast its long, dark shadow. These were the global theaters, often dismissed as sideshows, yet they demanded immense resources, inflicted horrific suffering, and, crucially, played pivotal roles in shaping the war's ultimate outcome and the geopolitical future in profound, often deceptive, ways. The Ottoman Empire's final agony, empires collide in the desert. The sprawling, ancient Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, entered the war on the side of the Central Powers in late 1914. This decision opened vast new fronts across the Middle East, sparking conflicts that would reshape the region for a century to come. Gallipoli's Folly, a peninsula of dreams and nightmares. One of the war's most audacious, and ultimately disastrous, campaigns unfolded in 1915, the Allied invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula. Championed by Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, the objective was ambitious: seize control of the Dardanelles Strait, the vital waterway to Constantinople, Istanbul, the Ottoman capital. This would knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, open a crucial supply route to Russia through the Black Sea, and potentially outflank the Central Powers. The plan was brilliant on paper, a logistical nightmare in execution. On April 25, 1915, British, French, and the newly formed Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ANZAC, troops launched amphibious landings at various points, including Cape Helles and the now legendary Anzac Cove. What they found was not lightly defended beaches, but steep, treacherous terrain, heavily fortified Ottoman positions, and fierce, determined resistance. The Gallipoli Campaign quickly devolved into a miniature Western Front: brutal trench warfare, impossible terrain, relentless shelling, and appalling sanitary conditions that led to rampant disease. The Anzac forces, fighting with astonishing bravery, captured a deep and lasting place in their respective national identities, but their heroism was met with equally fierce Ottoman resilience, often led by the young, resolute Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, who famously told his soldiers, "I do not order you to fight, I order you to die." After 9 months of unimaginable suffering and immense casualties, over 250,000 Allied and Ottoman soldiers killed, wounded, or missing, the campaign was finally abandoned in January 1916, a humiliating and costly failure that yielded no strategic gains. The Desert Revolt, Lawrence, Arabs, and the Promise of Freedom. Even as Gallipoli faltered, another, more successful, strategy was being pursued against the Ottomans, instigating an Arab revolt. The British, through the efforts of figures like Ronald Storrs and, most famously, the enigmatic T. E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, encouraged Arab tribes, particularly those led by Sharif Hussein bin Ali of Mecca, to rise up against their Ottoman overlords. The lure was the promise of an independent Arab state stretching across the Ottoman Levant. The Arab Revolt, commencing in June 1916, proved strategically invaluable. While not a conventional army, the Arab irregulars, often advised by Lawrence, waged a highly effective guerrilla campaign. They repeatedly attacked the Hijaz Railway, the vital Ottoman supply line linking Damascus to Medina, disrupting troop movements and supplies. This tied down substantial Ottoman forces who might otherwise have been used against British forces in Palestine and Mesopotamia. Lawrence himself, a captivating figure of almost mythical proportions, proved adept at understanding and leveraging Arab tribal politics, becoming a conduit for British gold and weapons, and a symbol of the elusive promise of Arab freedom. The Last Crusade, Britain's advance through Mesopotamia and Palestine. Simultaneously, major British campaigns unfolded in Ottoman Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and Palestine. In Mesopotamia, British Indian forces, initially securing Persian oil fields, pushed north from Basra. This campaign was marked by immense logistical challenges, extreme heat, and devastating outbreaks of disease. It climaxed in the disastrous 1916 siege of Kut al-Amara, where a large British Indian garrison was forced to surrender after a prolonged siege, a humiliating blow to British prestige. However, under renewed leadership and improved logistics, British forces eventually resumed their advance, capturing Baghdad in March 1917, a significant strategic and psychological victory. Further west, in Palestine, British forces, commanded by General Edmund Allenby, launched a series of offensives. Utilizing combined arms tactics and incorporating elements of the Arab Revolt, Allenby achieved decisive victories. In December 1917, Jerusalem fell to British forces, a moment of immense symbolic importance for the Allies. By late 1918, the last major Ottoman armies in the Levant were decisively defeated at battles like Megiddo, signaling the final collapse of the Ottoman Empire after over 600 years. The genocide Germany enabled, smuggled evidence that shames the West. Amidst the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the grand campaigns of the Desert War, a horror of unimaginable scale unfolded, the systematic extermination of the Armenian population. From 1915, under the guise of wartime necessity and relocation, the Young Turk government of the Ottoman Empire began a deliberate policy of mass murder and deportation against its Armenian Christian minority. Armenians were forced from their ancestral homes, marched into the Syrian desert without food or water, subjected to mass shootings, starvation, and unimaginable brutality. This was not a byproduct of war, it was a premeditated act of genocide, driven by extreme Turkish nationalism and paranoia, aiming to create a racially pure Ottoman state. Estimates vary, but between 1 million and 1.5 million Armenians perished. The modern lie here is particularly chilling, not just the lie told to the victims, but the complicity of the international community. Germany, as the Ottoman Empire's ally, had extensive knowledge of these atrocities. German diplomats and military officers on the ground sent back horrified reports, detailing the massacres. Walther Rosseler, the German consul in Aleppo, wrote in a telegram dated July 27, 1915, "The deportations are being carried out in an utterly barbaric way. The government here has long aimed at exterminating the Armenians. The German ambassador is doing nothing despite my constant urging." Henry Morgenthau Sr., the American ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, bravely attempted to intervene and openly condemned the atrocities. He smuggled out dozens of detailed reports, pleading with Washington and London to act. He later wrote, "When the Turkish authorities gave the orders for these deportations, they were merely giving the death warrant to a whole race. They understood this well, and in their conversations with me, they made no particular attempt to conceal the fact." Despite these desperate pleas and overwhelming evidence, Allied nations were preoccupied with the war effort and lacked the means or political will to intervene effectively. Germany, prioritizing its alliance and strategic interests, largely turned a blind eye, effectively enabling the genocide. This silence, this inaction in the face of such calculated brutality, remains a profound stain on the conscience of the period, demonstrating how strategic imperatives could override basic human morality, setting a terrifying precedent for future atrocities. Africa's hidden war, colonial clashes and unsung sacrifices. Far from the battlefields of Europe, the Great War also raged across the vast continent of Africa, as Allied powers moved to dismantle Germany's colonial empire. These were forgotten campaigns, fought by forgotten soldiers, yet their human cost was immense. Germany's lost colonies, a global scramble for African lands. Germany possessed significant colonial holdings in Africa, Togoland, Cameroon, German Southwest Africa, Namibia, and German East Africa, Tanzania. Almost immediately upon the outbreak of war, these colonies became targets for Allied forces, eager to strip Germany of its overseas possessions and secure resources. Togoland and Cameroon, geographically surrounded by French and British colonies, fell relatively quickly after short campaigns. German Southwest Africa was conquered by South African forces after a year of fighting. However, German East Africa became the stage for a truly remarkable, long-running guerrilla campaign. Under the brilliant command of General Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, a small force of German officers and askari, African soldiers, successfully evaded and fought a much larger Allied force, comprising British, South African, Indian, and Belgian troops, for the entire duration of the war. Ledovorbek's Schutztrupp tied up hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, forcing them to pursue him across vast, inhospitable terrain, suffering immense casualties from disease and exhaustion. His forces remained undefeated, only surrendering days after the armistice in Europe, a testament to his tactical genius and the resilience of his African troops. The Forgotten Soldiers, African troops on European battlefields. The war in Africa was not only fought by Africans but also saw significant numbers of African troops deployed to European battlefields. France, in particular, heavily relied on its colonial subjects, recruiting hundreds of thousands of soldiers from across West Africa, the Tirailleurs Senegalese, North Africa, and Madagascar. Britain also deployed units like the British West Indies Regiment. These soldiers fought with immense bravery on the Western Front, in Gallipoli, and other theaters, often enduring brutal conditions, racial discrimination, and suffering disproportionately high casualty rates. Their vital contributions are often overlooked in mainstream histories, a quiet testament to the global reach of the war and the universal cost paid by people from every corner of the world, regardless of their direct stake in Europe's imperial rivalries. Asia's silent play, Japan's rise and China's humiliation. Even in Asia, far from the Central European conflict, the Great Wars served as a catalyst for shifting power dynamics, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. Japan's gambit, seizing German power in the Pacific. Japan, eager to expand its influence in East Asia and the Pacific, entered the war on the Allied side in August 1914. Its immediate objective was clear: seize Germany's colonial holdings in the region. Japan quickly moved to capture the German-leased territory of Qingdao, Kaichou, on China's Shandong Peninsula, a key strategic port. Supported by a small British contingent, Japanese forces successfully besieged and captured Qingdao in November 1914. Simultaneously, Japan seized German Pacific Islands, including the Marianas, Carolines, and Marshall Islands. This swift and decisive action cemented Japan's position as the dominant naval and colonial power in East Asia, marking a significant strategic gain that went largely unchallenged by the preoccupied Western powers. China's fate, the 21 demands and the seeds of resentment. While Japan gained, China suffered. Weak and politically fragmented, China declared its neutrality, hoping to avoid entanglement. However, Japan seized the opportunity to press its own imperial ambitions. In January 1915, Japan presented China with the infamous 21 Demands, a secret ultimatum designed to grant Japan vast economic and political concessions, including control over Shandong, railway rights, and even the appointment of Japanese political advisors in China. China, militarily unable to resist, was forced to accept many of the demands, though international pressure helped to soften some of the harshest terms. This episode was a profound humiliation for China, deeply fueling anti-Japanese sentiment and strengthening Chinese nationalism. It laid bare China's precarious position in the international order and planted deep seeds of resentment that would blossom into future conflicts. The modern lie of national sovereignty was exposed here, as a weak nation's fate was decided by the opportunistic maneuvers of a stronger power, even amidst a global war supposedly fought for self-determination. The Grey Wolves of the Sea, Naval Warfare's Brutal Evolution. Beneath the crashing waves and across the vast ocean expanses, a different kind of war raged, a struggle for economic strangulation and technological supremacy. Jutland's Fury, the only clash of the giants. Despite the intense pre-war naval arms race, there was only one major fleet engagement between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet, the Battle of Jutland, fought off the coast of Denmark on May 31 to June 1, 1916. Both sides sought a decisive victory that would establish naval supremacy and allow their surface fleets to break out or contain. The battle involved over 250 ships, including the mighty dreadnoughts and battlecruisers, clashing in a chaotic, fog-shrouded encounter. Initial British battlecruiser losses were heavy, highlighting vulnerabilities in their ship design and ammunition handling. Tactical errors and miscommunications on both sides prevented either commander from achieving a decisive knockout blow. While Germany inflicted greater losses on the British, sinking more ships and causing more casualties, the strategic outcome was clear: the German High Seas Fleet, despite its tactical successes, was forced to retreat back to port and never again seriously challenged the British Grand Fleet for control of the surface seas. Jutland confirmed British naval dominance, ensuring their vital blockade of Germany remained in place, and forcing Germany to rely almost entirely on its submarines. The U-boat scourge, when submarines ruled the waves. If Jutland confirmed the stalemate of surface fleets, the U-boat war proved to be the true struggle for oceanic dominance. Initially, U-boats operated under cruiser rules, surfacing to warn merchant ships before sinking them. However, as the war dragged on and the British naval blockade tightened, Germany faced increasing economic strangulation. In February 1917, Germany took the desperate gamble of resuming unrestricted submarine warfare. Their calculation was stark: they could sink enough Allied merchant shipping, especially to Britain, within 6 months to force Britain to surrender, before the United States, infuriated by attacks on its shipping, could effectively intervene. For a terrifying period, it seemed they might succeed. U-boat sinking soared, reaching a peak of nearly 900,000 tons in April 1917, threatening Britain's very survival. The modern lie that the seas could be safely traversed was shattered by the unseen predators beneath the waves. The convoy cure, a lifeline against the underwater terror. Britain, on the brink of starvation, desperately sought a solution. Though initially resistant due to traditional naval doctrine, the British Admiralty, largely persuaded by the American Admiral William S. Sims, finally adopted the convoy system in May 1917. Merchant ships would sail in large, protected groups, escorted by naval destroyers, sloops, and later, U.S. Navy warships. The convoy system proved to be the lifeline against the underwater terror. While individual convoys could still be attacked, the overall rate of U-boat sinkings plummeted dramatically. Combined with rapid advancements in anti-submarine warfare, ASW, technologies, more effective depth charges, hydrophones for passive acoustic detection, and early patrol aircraft, the Allies gradually gained the upper hand. The U-boat menace, though never entirely eliminated, was contained, ensuring that vital supplies continued to reach Britain and allowing American troops and supplies to cross the Atlantic safely, ultimately turning the tide of the war. Knights of the Sky, from reconnaissance to dogfights. The First World War also witnessed the birth of air power, a dimension of warfare previously confined to science fiction. From fragile observation platforms, aircraft rapidly evolved into deadly fighting machines, adding a new, thrilling, and terrifying element to the conflict. The birth of air combat, from spotting to killing machines. At the war's outset, aircraft were primarily used for reconnaissance and artillery spotting, providing invaluable eyes in the sky that could pierce the secrecy of enemy movements and direct unseen shellfire. Pilots initially engaged in polite waves, then evolved to throwing bricks, then pistols and rifles, at their airborne adversaries. But rapid technological innovation soon transformed these fragile machines. The development of the synchronized machine gun, pioneered by the German Fokker E.I in 1915, allowed a machine gun to fire through the arc of a spinning propeller without hitting the blades. This invention created the true fighter plane and led to the Fokker scourge, giving German airmen a temporary advantage. Soon, both sides were producing specialized fighters and bombers, engaging in increasingly complex aerial maneuvers and duels. The era of aerial combat had begun, proving that the skies, too, could become a deadly battlefield. Aces in the sky, the legendary pilots who defined a new kind of war. The aerial combat of World War I, with its individualistic duels high above the trenches, spawned a new kind of hero, the flying ace. These pilots, with their multiple confirmed kills, captured the public imagination, standing in stark contrast to the anonymous, mass slaughter of the Western Front. Figures like Germany's Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, with his distinctive red triplane and 80 confirmed victories, became legendary. He was a master tactician, a cold and efficient hunter in the sky. For the Allies, there was America's Eddie Rickenbacker, a former race car driver who became the leading American ace with 26 kills. Canada's Billy Bishop, with 72 victories, and France's René Fonck, credited with 75, also achieved legendary status. These aces, with their daring exploits and chivalrous aerial duels, represented a romanticized, almost medieval, vision of warfare, even as the ground beneath them was consumed by industrial-scale butchery. Their stories provided a much-needed narrative of individual heroism in a war that otherwise seemed devoid of it. Beyond the dogfight, bombing raids and the future of warfare. Beyond the dogfights, the war also saw the very beginnings of strategic bombing. Germany used its massive Zeppelin airships for bombing raids over British cities as early as 1915, followed by the more effective Gotha bombers in 1917. While the material damage was limited, the psychological impact on the British home front was significant, bringing the reality of the war directly to civilians far from the front lines. The Allies, too, conducted retaliatory bombing raids. These early efforts, though crude, foreshadowed the aerial bombardments of future conflicts, demonstrating that the skies could be used not just for observation or individual combat, but for projecting destructive power directly onto enemy cities and industries. The modern lie that civilians were safe behind the lines was definitively shattered, hinting at a future where total war would truly encompass all aspects of society. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please don't forget to like, comment and share this video. Also don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon, so that you don't miss out the next video. For now, you can continue with the next video or can go through the complete playlist provided here.